Chinese Chery Motor Group's premium brand Jaecoo brings us this mid-sized SUV, the Jaecoo 7. It's a striking thing and no one else in your street will have one, but should you take a risk with an unknown brand? You might be tempted.
Premium Chinese maker Jaecoo enters the mid-sized SUV segment with this car, the Jaecoo 7. The brand name's apparently derived from the German word Jäger, which means hunter or cool, but what we served up here is very definitely yet another taste of the Orient. You may already have lost track of all the various new Chinese manufacturers entering our market. Well, the one we're looking at here is an aspirational marque from China's biggest car exporter, Chery, a conglomerate that sold nearly 2.6 million cars in 2024 alone, more than the entire BMW Group managed, and has already launched a more mainstream brand, Omoda, into our market. Chery's had a joint venture with Jaguar Land Rover since 2012. It builds JLR models in China and has drawn on that expertise for the first Jaecoo model it will sell here, this Jaecoo 7. It's an aggressively styled mid-sized SUV running on a stretched version of the chassis of the first Omoda model to launch in our market, the Omoda 5. And it costs about the same as slightly smaller Qashqai class family SUVs, whilst offering more equipment and a bit more pavement presence. Sounds quite promising. So, should you take a chance on an unknown brand and switch to something a bit different in this segment? Well, to find out, as usual, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test. If, like fellow Chinese brand BYD, Jaecoo had launched its combustion model in this segment solely with plug-in hybrid power, this car would look quite sophisticated. The BYD reference is intentional because in PHEV form, this Jaecoo 7 shares its plug-in hybrid powertrain with the BYD Seal UDMI model we tried and liked recently. There's a 1.5-litre petrol engine mated to an electric motor energised by an 18.3 kilowatt-hour battery, providing for a reasonable, though nowhere near class-leading, 56-mile EV range figure. Jaecoo, though, wants to broaden this model's reach with more affordable variants you can't plug in, which would be fine if it had an efficient, affordable engine to offer, or ideally a Toyota-style self-charging hybrid. Unfortunately, it doesn't, so mainstream Jaecoo 7s can only offer the somewhat thrashy and relatively inefficient unelectrified 1.6-litre turbo petrol unit we're trying here. This puts out 147 PS and comes in two forms. Our test car has two-wheel drive, which, if the sport drive mode is selected, will get you to 62 miles an hour in 10.3 seconds en route to 112 miles an hour. There's also a four-wheel drive variant, but that's a bit slower, reaching the 62 mile an hour benchmark in 11.8 seconds. In both cases, the engine comes mated to a 7-speed dual-clutch DCT auto transmission, and it's the relative lethargy of this gearbox, as much as the engine, that makes this car feel slower than those performance figures suggest it should be. This transmission's a bit too eager to kick down too, which doesn't help with smooth progress. So if you find yourself captivated by a Jaecoo 7, we can understand why you might feel the need to find the extra for the PHEV version we mentioned earlier. This only comes in two-wheel drive form, but it does have its share of clever tech, a so-called SHS or super hybrid system that uses the engine and the brake regen system to always keep the battery above 0% of charge. So even if you forget or aren't able to plug in, you'll still find the car reverting to electric motion around town. Though, as we referenced earlier, the petrol engine in this PHEV is at 1.5 litres, slightly smaller than that used in the conventional models. The SHS system's total output is of course vastly superior, rated at 204 PS. Enough to get the car to 62 miles an hour in 8.5 seconds en route to 108. The car always starts under EV power, and you can drive in pure electric mode up to motorway speeds, or with the engine and motor working together in unison. When the engine cuts in, it does so pretty seamlessly. It's a pity that Jaecoo isn't also offering the larger battery version of this PHEV setup, which in the comfort spec version of the BYD Seal UDMI can take you up to 78 miles. The only area where this conventional 1.6-litre petrol Jaecoo 7 model holds an advantage over the PHEV is in terms of handling. Predictably so, since the plug-in hybrid version has to carry around a curb weight of around 1.8 tonnes, so was never going to feel as light on its feet at speed through the turns as its lesser siblings. Not that many Jaecoo 7 drivers are ever going to be putting those differences to the test. The relative lack of steering feel, combined with the amount of body roll you get through the corners, is an effective deterrent to daring do through the bends. When the Chinese makers are finally able to properly benchmark and match the best European, Japanese and South Korean rivals in this segment, they really will be a force to be reckoned with. Here we'd hoped for better, especially as the suspension is a little on the firm side, not uncomfortably so, but enough to feel potholes and speed humps quite keenly, more so than in that rival BYD model I just mentioned. It's certainly nothing like the supple springing you get in a Tiguan. Still, this Jaecoo would be an acceptable school-run commuting companion, and it has some nice touches, like a clever surround view camera system that's able to provide images of the road beneath the wheels, so you know how close they are to curbs and similar obstacles. At the wheel you sit quite high and commandingly, certainly compared with some of the less SUV-like crossover segment rivals Jaecoo wants to compete with. Sight lines are great across the flat and square bonnet, making narrow lanes or in-town manoeuvring simple. Light off-road work is aided by 200mm of ground clearance and a 600mm wading depth. There's a strange touch too. When you switch drive modes, the in-car assistant will tell you so. So switching to sport will be accompanied by a voice announcing sport mode. You might find that a little irritating after a while. The four-wheel drive 1.6-litre petrol model we mentioned earlier features 7 driving modes, including sand, mud, snow and off-road settings. The approach and departure angles are rated at 21 and 29 degrees respectively, with a maximum breakover angle of 200mm. A Bosch-developed integrated power brake system on four-wheel drive models simulates a differential lock with enhanced and faster locking capability. This setup able to respond to a loss of traction in less than 0.1 of a second, providing the fastest four-wheel drive response times when compared to its peers. No one in your street is going to have anything that looks quite like a Jaecoo 7. The rock-in-river design ethos that apparently inspired its styling will be divisive, but it's certainly different. And it rather distracts your attention from something arguably more interesting, the brand's chosen dimensions. The 4,500mm body length, emphasised by these subtle silver roof rails, doesn't easily pigeonhole this car against the established mid-sized SUV opposition. It's usefully bigger than a lower mid-sized model like a Nissan Qashqai by 75mm, but not quite as large as an upper mid-sized model like a Volkswagen Tiguan, which is 39mm longer. The aspirations here lie against those more expensive models, hence the big aero-style 19-inch wheels that all Jaecoo 7 models have. Even if you didn't know about Jaecoo parent company Chery's close ties with Jaguar Land Rover, you might guess at that collaboration from side-on perspective there are definite hints of Evoque, but with premium touches like hidden electric door handles. Those might remind you of another Land Rover product, the Range Rover Velar, and if they don't, the way this rear end is styled certainly might. It gets smartly pixelated tail lamps, a subtle rear spoiler, these vertical side reflectors and silvered tailpipe housings in the greyed out lower section of the bumper. At the front, the blocky, imposing front end with its enormous vertically slatted waterfall-style grille makes quite a statement and is nothing like anything else in the segment. Flanking this appendage are thin daytime running lights with Audi-like square LED elements. The main headlights lie further down. So, extrovert on the outside, but as the door handles spring out to meet you on your approach, you might wonder what it's going to be like inside. Well, you might not be quite as taken with the cabin, with its curiously shaped wheels, strange aircraft-style gear shifter, and a beyond classic design theme based around quite a commanding driving position. A tall centre console and this huge portrait format touchscreen. Plenty of design efforts gone in here with lots of different kinds of horizontally orientated surfacing, along with tiny silver audio speakers in the A-pillars and smart slim ambient lighting strips in the doors. And Jaecoo's thankfully resisted the temptation to apply too much shiny piano black trimming. But despite all that, you'd be unlikely to think you were in a premium brand model, certainly not in this base deluxe spec variant anyway. There's a slightly nicer standard of trim with the plusher luxury trimmed models. Still, attention to detail is quite impressive, with subtle patterns on the trim elements, a smart silver starter button and Defender-like rivets in the metal effect silver plastic door handles. And you're treated to powered, heated, multi-mode, all-sense seats. You get a digital instrument screen, of course, at 10.25 inches in size, which you might initially think looks quite smart, though it does throw rather too much information at you with small fonts that are difficult to read at a glance. A central speed display is flanked by data readings on the left and revs on the right. You can choose between two screen layouts, with classic surrounding the flanking readouts in circles, and streamlined, removing the circles and replacing the analog style rev counter with a digital one. There's a useful camera display when you're indicating, though that blocks navigation instructions if you happen to be following them. Avoid base trim and you won't have to look at this screen much. As with the luxury spec variants, a head-up display comes as standard. We mentioned this portrait format central touchscreen powered by a Snapdragon processor. It's 13.2 inches in size in this base two-wheel drive model, but grows to 14.8 inches in size if you opt for a four-wheel drive or PHEV variant, which means you gain an upgraded built-in 8-speaker Sony audio system. Thankfully, the home screen isn't as cluttered as the instrument display, and its background can be varied through 4 different wallpaper options, which might change the cabin ambience nicely to suit whatever your daily mood happens to be. And as well as navigation and an around view monitor, there are some useful features like a gallery for your pictures and an option for video streaming. Various shortcut buttons reside on this screen's bottom frame, including one that lets you swipe displays like a smartphone. The option you'll be using most often is the lower right-hand car settings option, which brings up a Tesla-like screen of drive setting modes. Unfortunately, all the climate system controls reside on this monitor too, which is a problem not only because you have to keep looking away from the road to alter temperature and fan speed, but also because when you activate the wireless Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring, all the native screen controls disappear, which means you can't alter the cabin climate. Someone's really not thought this through. And you could say the same about this monitor's rather overcomplicated menu and sub-menu format, another thing which will divert your eyes from the road for far too long. Get familiar with this cabin and you'll come across some nice but slightly strange touches. This QI wireless charging pad has space for 2 phones, but can charge only one. There's a huge dash-top speaker for this deluxe model, standard, rather limited output 6-speaker audio system. And the ambient lighting system, which can change with the drive modes, also has a curious feature that allows it to flash with the music you're playing. When we've tried that, it actually doesn't seem to be able to keep with the tempo and flashes colours like a discotheque. As we said, this gear shifter is an unusual looking thing as well, though you won't have to worry about that with the PHEV version, because there it gets replaced by a steering column gear shifting stalk. What else? Well, the faux leather seat upholstery might not feel especially premium, but the chairs themselves are supportive and feature comfortable headrests that are wide and gently curved. Frontward visibility from them is great. Unfortunately, rearward isn't, thanks to the tiny back window, so you're going to need the standard rear sensors and 360-degree camera system. We're not a fan of these touch-sensitive steering wheel switches and don't think you will be either, and concerns about build longevity might be emphasised by little things like the amount of play you get in these steering column stalks. But cabin storage space isn't bad. The glove box, which incorporates a pen clip, is reasonably sized. The door bins are wide but shallow, and there's a large, long storage area below the centre console with a 12-volt socket and both USB-A and C ports. This lidded box between the seats has a lift-out top tray, and ahead of it there's even a small shelf to accommodate a tissue box with a small slot above it that works as a little dispenser. Lovely. Thanks to the boxy shape and the quite lengthy 2,672mm wheelbase length, rear seat space ought to be a selling point. Actually, it doesn't feel as spacious back here as the external dimensions suggest. It might, but two adults should be pretty comfortable, though unfortunately this bench doesn't slide, nor does the backrest recline. Despite the standard panoramic glass roof, which gives this part of the interior a light and airy feel, headroom is a strong selling point too, even for 6-footers. There's enough cabin width and a low enough centre tunnel to allow a middle-seated adult, but because of the way the middle part of the bench is sculpted, that person wouldn't be particularly comfortable. What else? Well, there are little LED reading lights in the overhead grab handles, the usual armrest with cup holders, seat back pockets and a central cubby with USB-A and C ports nearby. Here's a nice touch, borrowed from Korean brand models, the provision of electric controls for the front passenger seat on the side of that seat so that they're easily accessible for a rear-seated passenger wanting to increase legroom by sliding it forward. The faux rivet-trimmed doors have shallow pockets compromised in size by the big speakers, and the big rear quarter-light windows are another aid to increasing cabin light back here. Isofix points reside beneath large plastic covers, and these, together with the wide opening doors, should make it easy for parents to install a child seat back here, should they wish. The two luxury spec models feature heated rear seats too. And out back, well, there's a standard powered tailgate, and you can use the car's centre screen to set the height to which it raises. Once the tailgate's open, it's clear that rear seat room seems to have compromised boot space a bit. But this 412-litre space should be just about sufficient for the needs of most families. The deep load bay can't offer an adjustable height boot floor, but it does have other nice touches. Jaecoo has borrowed a trick from premium brands and built lights into the inner side of the tailgate to aid nighttime loading. There's a warning triangle here too, and here's something we've never seen before, bag hooks on the inner side of the tailgate. There are two. There are also two more bag hooks on the cargo sidewalls, a light on the left and no fewer than 6 tie-down points. Plus, this conventional petrol version has useful underfloor storage. If you've longer items to carry but 2 rear-seated passengers, those long items will have to go on the roof because Jaecoo offers neither a ski hatch or a convenient 40-20-40 rear seatback split. Folding the rear bench extends the space available to 1,335 litres. Jaecoo feels confident enough not to massively undercut rivals on price. Well, not mainstream rivals anyway. The base 1.6-litre 4-cylinder, 2-wheel drive deluxe model we're trying here cost from just under £30,000 at the time of this test in spring 2025. You'll need a bit more, around £33,000 for the 4-wheel drive model with its 7-mode 4x4 system, which also comes with a higher luxury level of spec. Luxury trim is conditional with the front-driven 1.5-litre PHEV version, which cost around £35,000 as we filmed. At the time of our test, the Marque had 71 UK dealers and expected that number to rise to 150 by the end of 2025. Those asking prices certainly give you a lot of car for the money. To give you some class perspective, you're almost getting an upper mid-sized family SUV of the size of something like, say, a Ford Kuga or a Volkswagen Tiguan for the price of a lower mid-sized SUV like, for example, a Nissan Qashqai, a Mini Countryman, a Suzuki Vitara or perhaps a Seat Ateca. Jaecoo isn't alone in pursuing this kind of middle ground. Similar in terms of dimensions are two closely related Korean models, the Kia Sportage and the Hyundai Tucson, which, along with Škoda's Karoq, at first glance look similarly priced to this Jaecoo, but would cost you significantly more if you spec'd them up to a similar level to this Chinese contender. And if you were to factor in popular segment choices like the Vauxhall Grandland, Peugeot 3008, Mazda CX-5 and the Jeep Compass, you'd find yourself paying considerably more even before you took equipment levels into account. The same is true of two other interestingly styled, unknown brand mid-sized SUV contenders you might like if you're attracted by this Jaecoo, KGM's Taurus and Action models. There are similarly sized segment contenders that can usefully undercut this Jaecoo on price. We'd point you towards Citroen's C5 Aircross, the MG HS, KGM's Corando and the weirdly named GWM Haval Jolion Pro if your budget's tight. But if you specified any of them up to Jaecoo 7 Deluxe level, the price saving wouldn't actually be that great. If you've decided on a Jaecoo 7 in SHS PHEV form, the savings over established mainstream branded models at first glance look equally great, though we should point out that in this form, the Jaecoo is slightly undercut by its identically engined BYD Seal UDMI cousin and considerably undercut by an MG HS PHEV. If, having considered all of the alternatives, you feel you might like to give this Jaecoo 7 a try, then your mind might be made up by this Chinese model's exceptionally high level of standard equipment. All variants get 19-inch alloy wheels, full LED headlights, and a full-length 1.1 square metres of panoramic glass sunroof, as well as a powered tailgate, keyless entry, a driving mode system, adaptive cruise control and a 540-degree camera parking system with an invisible bonnet feature. Inside, there's faux leather upholstery, powered heated front seats, a cool 50-watt wireless phone charger, a multicolour ambient lighting system and a 10.25-inch LCD instrument cluster. All of this comes fitted to the base spec variant we're trying here, which bears the spec name Deluxe, a trim designation we've rarely seen since the 70s. If you want four-wheel drive or a PHEV drivetrain with your Jaecoo 7, then you'll have to have it with a plusher luxury level of spec. With that, the 13.2-inch central infotainment screen of the Deluxe version gets replaced by a larger 14.8-inch monitor, incorporating an 8-speaker Sony sound system. At luxury level, Jaecoo also throws in a head-up display, a heated steering wheel, heated rear seats, and ventilated front seats with a welcome feature that retracts them to welcome the driver when the door is opened. What about safety kit? Well, to justify this car's 5-star Euro NCAP safety rating, there are up to 21 advanced driver assist systems, including autonomous emergency braking, forward collision warning, and an intelligent avoidance system that alerts you if you're about to pass too closely to a wide vehicle. You also get lane departure prevention, an intelligent active speed limit system, a driver monitoring system, and safe exit warning. Plus lane change assist, emergency lane keeping assist, and rear cross traffic alert. There are 8 airbags with an extended pressure retention feature that provides an extra layer of protection, all linked to an e-call system that'll alert the emergency services with your GPS location if they inflate. This Jaecoo is intrinsically safe as well, thanks to an advanced cage design constructed from high-strength steel and reinforced bars. You shouldn't have particularly high expectations for efficiency when it comes to the 1.6-litre petrol Jaecoo 7 models. This 4-cylinder engine is something of a stopgap and will probably be eventually replaced by a hybrid. Even driven exclusively in the car's most frugal eco mode, it manages very unremarkable figures, rated in front-driven form at 37.7 mpg on the combined cycle and 169 grams per kilometre of CO2 for this two-wheel drive model, which at the time of this test meant VED road tax payments of £1,360 for year one and £195 for year two. We've struggled to get much more than 30 mpg in regular use throughout this test, which, to give you some perspective, is about 10 to 15 miles worse than most conventional brand rival models we've reviewed. As you'd expect, efficiency takes a dip if you go for the four-wheel drive version. It's 35.3 mpg and 182 grams per kilometre of CO2 with that model. All of which might encourage you to find the extra the brand wants for the PHEV version. With a 60-litre fuel tank, that plug-in hybrid has an EV range of 56 miles, which gives a combustion and EV combined range of 745 miles and a combined fuel economy figure of 403 mpg or 47 miles per gallon with the battery in a high depletion scenario. It delivers emissions of 23 grams per kilometre of CO2. The plug-in hybrid model, C80L made, 18.3 kilowatt-hour battery can be DC fast charged at up to 40 kilowatts, which allows it to charge from 30 to 80% in about 40 minutes. That's not particularly fast. For perspective, we'll tell you that a rival Volkswagen Tiguan e-hybrid PHEV can charge its larger 19.7 kilowatt-hour battery from 5 to 80% in just 26 minutes. AC charging this Jaecoo from a typical 7.4 kilowatt home wall box will take 6 hours and 30 minutes. The PHEV model also offers vehicle-to-load capability so that external devices can be charged from the drive battery via a 3.3 kilowatt charging plug. Across the range there are screens to show your frugality, but they only show how the car's performed over the last 31 miles. A 7-year, 100,000 mile manufacturer's warranty is standard with no mileage limit for the first 3 years, and rather impressively, roadside recovery comes included throughout the 7-year period. Insurance is Group 21 for the 1.6 petrol two-wheel drive, Group 22 for the 1.6 petrol four-wheel drive, and 31 for the PHEV. You might worry about residual values from an unknown brand, but initially experts suggest that these should be competitive. After 3 years and 36,000 miles, this base petrol model is expected to hold on to 48.5% of its original value. Jaecoo offers the option of an interest-free 3-year servicing plan for around £550, which seems well worth having. And the centre screen's vehicle settings section can give you maintenance reminders when garage visits are due. In this new electrified era, everyone seems more open to the idea of buying into an unknown brand, even if the cars it sells aren't particularly electrified. So where, even just a few years ago, this Jaecoo 7 would have struggled to make any UK market impact at all, now it may well sell in numbers large enough to justify the arrival of other models from this aspirational Chinese brand. Customers will be attracted by this car's distinctive looks, its generous equipment levels and its spacious cabin. There's affordable pricing too, though much of the benefit of that is undone on this conventional petrol model by underwhelming engine efficiency. The drive dynamics too aren't quite up to those of more established rival models, and you might also, like us, doubt that this car really is quite as premium as Jaecoo thinks it is. Maybe it doesn't matter. If you like the look of this car, don't need pin-sharp handling, and perhaps find yourself attracted by the SHS plug-in hybrid version, you'll probably find it to be refreshingly different, which the Jaecoo 7 needs to be to stand out in such a crowded market.